Welcome to another episode of Four Guys Talking About AI. I'm here with my friends Neil Polachek, Greg Sterling, and John Gerard. Hey guys, how's it going?
What's happening?
Good. How are you?
Good. What a week in AI. Let's talk about it. Apple.
Every week is what a week in AI these days.
Every week is, but wow, with Apple, what a story this is. Greg, you want to lead off with what's going on with Apple this week?
Well, at the highest level, Apple was under pressure to do a big splashy AI rollout to kind of keep pace with Microsoft and Google, and there had been leaked information about a partnership. Was evaluating Gemini and ChatGPT as a partnership to play catch up because they didn't have enough of their own internal technology, according to these rumors. And so they showed up yesterday it was Monday. What day? Whatever. Sometime this week, they did their WWDC kind of canned keynote, which had a ton of non-AI stuff in it, but the stuff that the market was really focused on was the AI stuff. And what they're doing really quickly is they're sort of infusing LLMs across generative AI across platforms, Mac, iPad, and iPhone, of course. And then ChatGPT is going to be, and you can do, image creation and writing stuff. And there's other stuff that is happening, too much to talk about with images and emojis and other things. But the ChatGPT integration kind of wasn't an afterthought exactly, but it was not the main event. It was not, they didn't lead off with it. What they did is they said basically, and we've got this ChatGPT integration where if Siri, which is getting a big upgrade, if Siri determines that your question is better answered by ChatGPT, a little dialogue will come down from the top and ask you if you want to submit it to ChatGPT. You opt in, ask for permission, and then presumably you get the screen filled with the ChatGPT answer. And it doesn't cost anything. ChatGPT doesn't get access to your data. And we were talking last time about how they're going to manage the privacy issues with having to upload data to the servers versus process on device. And they came out with some kind of tortured yet Apple-like solution to do that, where if they have to upload the query or whatever the information, then it's going to be in some super protected privacy environment that third parties can audit and so on and so forth. But so a lot of cool stuff, some of it less impressive than others. And the market really loved it because Apple's once again the most valuable company in the world, kind of leapfrogging over to NVIDIA and Microsoft, at least for today, based on some sense of investor relief that Apple is indeed embracing AI and is not going to completely fall behind.
Yeah, their stock went up 12% just since that announcement. So
I was kind of underwhelmed myself. So it says, try ChatGPT for doing this. It goes off and does it, brings it back to me. I stay within the Siri experience. I could just go to ChatGPT and do it myself. I mean, it felt a little bit half-hearted, in my opinion.
Well, that's not the only thing that they're doing, of course, but that's the thing that people have been most focused on.
And that got them a 12% increase in market cap.
Not just ChatGPT. ChatGPT was like the icing on the cake, I think. It was the idea that they had injected AI into their entire kind of stack and a lot of different consumer experiences across all their operating systems, including, I think, watchOS is getting some stuff there too. So it seemed like broadly they were, going all in on AI, although much of the Siri improvements don't roll out until the fall. They sort of had arrived in terms of their embrace of AI.
And didn't you say it was only going to be in the pro versions of this?
Yeah, that's what it seems like. Well, on the Mac, it requires the more advanced chips, and on the iPhone, it seems like they're going to limit it to the highest end devices, but we'll see how that goes. Like the 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max. So like the regular iPhone, and I don't know if SE is still around, wouldn't get those advanced.
Well, I can tell you, as somebody who's on the iPhone Pro Max 15 and downloaded the developer beta the second it was available, a lot of this stuff is actually not in the developer beta yet. So they showed a lot of stuff that actually hasn't even hit the developer release stuff. I'm kind of with Neil actually on the underwhelm. I was expecting maybe a little bit more. But there were some interesting things in it from my perspective. My favorite by far was that they subtly have rebranded AI as Apple Intelligence.
Yes, not so
Artificial
subtly.
like that. That's just, I mean, unbelievable, right? Like that there's going to be a whole category of people.
The audacity of Apple, you know.
The audacity, right? Like, what does AI stand for, mommy? Oh, it's Apple Intelligence. You know, like you can see that conversation happening around the dinner table.
Well, and the other thing is that their tagline for that was AI for the rest of us. I thought that was really interesting too.
Yeah, and look, that's good. That's good positioning, I think, because there is this accessibility thing. I suspect it's more myth than reality in terms of like how accessible this stuff really is. But a lot of people, I think, hear AI, know about it, think it's pretty interesting, think it's scary, don't know how to start using it. So that was actually, I thought, a nice little sleight of hand. On the ChatGPT stuff, I don't think that interface is going to hold. Like deeply integrating it with Siri so that it's seamless is going to be important. I agree with Neil. You can just go over to the ChatGPT app and probably have a better experience with the voice back and forth than this initial version of Siri. I wouldn't expect them to stop here, though. One thing I will say, there were two things I found very disruptive in an interesting way. One of them is the whole category of generative AI apps in the App Store just got eviscerated. So like all the systems, the apps and plugins that you can use to help you write your emails and help you write your text messages, bye. Like those, that's just,
that's the Sherlocking stuff. That's the Sherlocking stuff.
Yeah, that stuff is completely gone overnight.
Very Apple move.
Very Apple move. And honestly, I think we all should have expected that. This is obviously something that belongs a little more deeply integrated in the OS. Actually, same thing is happening a little bit with that company we were talking about last time, Limitless AI. Their initial product was this perfect recall kind of a thing. That so clearly belongs at the operating system level. In fact, so much so that Microsoft's Copilot has that. And I can't remember what they call it. It's maybe recall.
It's called recall.
Yeah.
I can't recall.
And it turns out they had to recall, which was interesting. But and then one last thing, and I'll get off the soapbox. Like, I think the most interesting thing, which is also not available in the developer beta, is this idea of interpreting my query in Siri and then writing that. I assume what's happening in the background is that it's actually writing those queries back to the app, to the OS, to execute something interesting for me. So
you're talking about like in an app or something.
Yeah. Like, what was that podcast that my wife sent me the other day? Right. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens in the background to make that actually work. I suspect what they're doing, although I didn't read any other people who are smarter than I am, who may know, is something like what Rabbit has been trying to do, which they called this large action model, which is basically, can I take somebody's written plain English request and create a machine understandable action out of that, because they're interacting directly with iOS on the developer side, they can do that like nobody else can. That part has the potential to be that kind of Apple magic. Of everything I saw, that was the most impressive.
So I did some math, $400 billion of incremental value in the last 2 days. And I mean, maybe it's there. That's the size of most companies. That's way bigger than most companies.
I bet half of that goes to NVIDIA for chips.
I mean, it's kind of staggering, 12%.
Yeah, it is.
It's a huge thing.
Yeah. And, I saw the woman doing the math on the iPad. I saw
the calculator.
I mean, that was interesting.
Yeah, it was. That's a great demo.
It was, like my grandkid now maybe will learn math differently than my kids or I did, but
isn't that taking OpenAI's and ChatGPT's whole demo a step further? Just saying, now look, it's on an Apple device. I did see that as well, and I thought that my feeling is that the market is really buying into the bigger, broader story of what this becomes, which is accessibility for AI to everybody, and turning this into a catalyst moment where people who are just your average everyday people now will start to use AI, whereas as we've talked about before, people hear about AI, they may have gone to ChatGPT to test it out or try it, and may have been underwhelmed because it didn't give them the right results that they wanted, and they didn't know how to use the prompts effectively, right? So the AI for everybody really is a brand promise for Apple.
If you have the Pro phone or the new chip. Otherwise...
Well, of course, they're not going to make it backwards compatible, right? That defeats the whole...
Yeah, they're trying to sell more devices.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not really for everybody.
I have two kind of competing thoughts. Andy, I don't want to cut you off if you weren't done. I have two kind of competing thoughts. There, as I was watching the keynote, there was just like thing after thing after thing, as Apple has done over the last, handful of cycles, where it was just relentless parade of features coming out, and a little bit overwhelming. And I wonder how many of these things people are going to really care about. Some people will care about some things, other people will care about other things. Now, having said that, certain kinds of small things can really matter to people. Like, you guys know who Marcus Brownlee is, who's a tech reviewer and influencer, pretty popular guy, does a lot of tech product reviews. So he talked a lot about the calculator, but he was also talking about the Gen emojis, where you can create your own emoji. And that's AI, but it's not, they're not saying AI created emoji. They're saying they branded it Gen emoji, this cute little thing. And I don't know this for sure, but that may become for certain categories of users a huge deal, right? I mean, there's small things like that Apple has done or is doing that can really blow up and become a big differentiator or a big deal or something, a must-have. I mean, I think about the green versus blue messaging bubbles. It's not exactly at that level, but nobody predicted that, right? Nobody predicted that one of the loyalty features of the iPhone would be the blue messaging bubble, and Google would get so bent out of shape about it and launch a massive, expensive PR campaign to try and get Apple to adopt RCS, which I guess they're doing now. But there are little things that Apple does, and to your point, Andy, about sort of democratizing it or making it sort of more friendly and accessible, that sometimes really blow up and that matter to people.
It's I was blown away by the whole Gen emoji thing, as if that was high value or something. It seems just like it's
a throwaway.
The toy, right? But what's really interesting, if you look at Snapchat as an analog, there's companies that make stickers for Snapchat that are, close to $1 billion companies now in valuation because they make stickers for Snapchat. It's unbelievable. So if you take that and you apply that to the whole Apple user base, I guess it's a big deal. But I'm kind of shocked that, they were parading around emojis as professionals.
But it seems really stupid and trivial on one level, but it matters to some people, and they wouldn't put it in the keynote. They wouldn't put it there unless they had heard from a lot of users this was something they were interested in.
I thought that too. That's a really salient point. That's
I think I totally agree with all that. I mean, I think that this whole idea of weaving all of this AI stuff so deeply into the experience that it's invisible is kind of what's happening, right? So we barely even think about what the technology is behind, Snapchat filters anymore. And there's 3 or 4 or 5 different ways that those filters actually work. We don't really care. They're just filters. This is just sort of the way that we all interact right now. And I think in pairing it with this idea of Apple intelligence, the line between what that's happening on my iPhone is being driven by AI, the way we conventionally think about it, and what is being driven by Apple intelligence is going to get really blurry. It's just, I think it's all just going to be this, experience that they're trying to create delight out of.
So let me ask you guys something about ChatGPT here, right? So this, and Craig, I'm going to botch his surname, the SVP of software, Craig Federini, I think is his surname. Anyway, he said, we're starting with ChatGPT because they're the best of breed. which is a total burn to, Google. But we're leaving the door open for others, right? And then subsequently in an interview, he said they wanted to work with Gemini. I don't know what that integration looks like, if you've got a menu of different AI tools or whatever. But is this a really strong and smart move for ChatGPT? How does this impact them, if at all? What do you guys think?
I think this is a huge endorsement for ChatGPT, just them being the front runner in this. And clearly, Apple's saying that they are the best. But, look, we've talked about Google playing the long game here. Google has more data than anybody. They'll probably blend the results, whether it comes from Gemini or ChatGPT, to create Apple Intelligence, whatever the right answer is. They'll have a layer that will probably determine that somehow. And you'll probably be able to have a slider on your phone to choose whichever LLM you want to use, if you want to use that as a default, just like you do with Maps or a browser. So I could see them doing something like that as well. But in the end, the user experience and the way, John, to your point of the lines being blurred as to what tool am I using underneath this to get my answer, I think that totally happens in this.
Yeah.
I don't think the user is going to care.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I mean, is this a big win for ChatGPT? I think it's a massive PR win. I mean, just if you look at sort of the hay that they are making at OpenAI with, little tweets and little, at the Apple and the ChatGPT logo sort of seen in the same frame. Like, I think that stuff, in fact, enough so that I'm kind of wondering which way the dollars are flowing in that partnership. You know what I mean? Like,
is ChatGPT paying Apple?
I mean,
sure they are.
Well, that's the default search thing, right? 20 billion for Google every year.
Exactly right. That would not be without precedent.
Except think about that for a second. ChatGPT is enabling Apple to really take the high road on Apple Intelligence. It's sort of the Intel inside. It's the intelligence inside. And then Apple's going to wrap it all up as Apple Intelligence, and people won't know what ChatGPT is.
It's and I don't think there's enough differentiation like at the LLM level between Claude and Gemini and ChatGPT for it to make a huge difference in what Apple is trying to do with all this right now, and B, for people to care. Like Intel did a great job of branding to the consumer so that people actually looked at Intel. Who was it? Was it AMD was the competitive chipset? That was the equivalent of the green bubble back in the PC days.
Yep.
It's like Intel was the blue. You don't want to be green, and I don't think that ChatGPT or Claude or any of these guys have that status in the ecosystem.
Except ChatGPT is really the only brand. If you want to say, is there a brand in AI? It's the only one is ChatGPT, and some other people will know things like insiders know Claude and Mistral and Meta, Llama, and
but the
Gemini,
mass market knows ChatGPT.
But the mass market only knows ChatGPT.
So maybe there is some mutual PR benefit in that whole thing happening.
Well, that's why Apple's calling it Apple Intelligence too, because they're just like, forget all these guys. And they'll be like the meta player. They'll aggregate them all if there's a reason to do that.
That's where I'm at, Andy. Totally.
And they'll create this higher ground in that positioning, and they own the user, so they want to continue making sure that the user knows that it's Apple who's creating those great experiences.
So what about search now? Let's talk a little bit about that, because we've talked about our own personal transition to some degree into an AI tool as an alternative to Google in some cases, or Perplexity, ChatGPT, Perplexity, whatever. For the longest time, there was sort of all the speculation about Apple building out its own search engine. Was Spotlight Search going to evolve into something truly competitive with Google? And, periodically these rumors have sort of cropped up. And, Google has sort of beaten that back with its payments. And Apple, doesn't necessarily want to spend billions of dollars trying to compete with Google when Google's paying it all this money and it can just, do the easy thing, which is to hand off to Google. But do we now, with this sort of mix of this in-app actions functionality, and I don't know if that goes to third parties, John. Like, I know that they're talking about that with Apple specific apps. I don't know if you're going to be able to make restaurant reservations through OpenTable or, whatever, if there's going to be that kind of integration with third party apps. I didn't see that. But does this now start to get into territory that would otherwise be owned by Google if you're on Siri and Siri's working better and, you can do more stuff on your device and it gets integrated into these apps and then you've got access to ChatGPT? Does it become a more complete tool that makes it less likely that you need to go to Google all the time to get, different kinds of information or to do stuff?
That should be the vision, shouldn't it?
Well, that was the original vision for Siri. The pre-Apple vision for Siri was, I may have said this, was that Siri was going to connect directly into apps and you were going to be able to do the thing you wanted to do. It would hand you off to the app and you could do that thing without having to go to Google first. That was the original vision that never was realized and now sort of showing up maybe again.
I suspect if you were able to look at the data from Google over the last 10 years, that there are certain categories of things that people used to search for that have been eroded by Siri already. And, the most obvious example, that would be something like weather, right? Like I probably went in and did like San Francisco weather inside the Google search bar a lot prior to the iPhone. And I did it less when the iPhone came out, and I did it way less as Siri evolved and it became convenient to just ask that question. So, just by virtue of the natural habit changes that I think we all make as these things become available, I think there's, a possibility for this massive erosion. We talked about it in the last few weeks around like, what is the category of information seeking searches? Like, I want to know some knowledge about this thing, as opposed to other kinds of searches. Like I want to go buy this thing, or I'm looking for a good restaurant. And that first category, as soon as people become familiar with like, hey, how does tidal amplification work? And how does the moon impact tides? Like, I'm not going to go to Google for that anymore.
If you get a good answer.
There won't be any need to. And that's kind of I think that this creates significant erosion in Google's market share because people will just use their phone, use Siri directly to, and I think behaviors will start to change once they start seeing results around just direct results and getting the answer. So you don't have to start searching again and clicking into websites and go finding what the answer is from 10 links. I think that people want answers immediately. So if they're getting those answers immediately through Siri, that will start to change behavior.
Neil and I have put together sort of a list of things that we think AI is going to impact, and Google, what is the sort of impact on Google is kind of one of the areas of speculation. And Neil had this very aggressive kind of statement that Google was going to lose half its traffic by some date X, right? Or, sort of the Gartner one is 25% by 2026 or something. And I just pushed back on that. I was like, no, that's not possible. It's not going to happen. But, the irony is that the iPhone may be the vehicle through which AI does do some of that erosion, which was something that might have been a little bit unpredictable a little while ago. And now, if this comes to pass and these things, we have yet to see how good Siri is, how good these integrations are. We've yet to have any direct experience of it. But let's assume that they're pretty good. The convenience and inertia around doing that kind of stuff will become significant.
If Siri could actually make a reservation for you without going to Resi or one of the apps that does that, just do it for you. That would change those dynamics a lot, I think.
Yeah, and there's a couple for that particular use, there's a lot of complexity around that. Like this is what Rabbit was trying to do with the large action model thing, which is to actually interact with some of the purpose-built apps that are out there for doing these kinds of things. They run into crazy problems. Weirdly enough, not as much even from the technical perspective as from the getting authenticated on the platform side. Like they're just having a really hard time because they actually drive that logging into the website to make your reservation. They drive that from the cloud. And so Resi is seeing all this traffic coming through and going, we're going to shut this IP down. It's this weird thing. So it's technically, feasible, but it's just hard. The alternative, which is I think where this is going to all go, is what Apple announced in terms of converting my plain English question into a command that can be executed at the OS level or the app level on the phone. That's where this happens, I think. So now it's going to interpret what I say and put that into a command that can be delivered to Resi on my phone. It's not quite, Neil, what you were asking for, but it's close.
But I'll get back a reservation.
You'll get back a reservation.
That's all I care about. I don't care what it does. I don't care how it does that.
It might be the wrong reservation for the wrong night for the wrong number of people, but you'll get back a reservation.
That would be a problem.
It raises this sort of interesting issue for developers and for brands. You want to hook into these platforms and you want that usage to be driven, but to what extent does it commoditize you in a certain way, right? If I interact with Siri and I say I want a reservation for such and such, or I want to buy tickets to something else, whatever the command is, and it takes that action for me, and I see the third party brand who is executing this kind of as an afterthought or as a little footnote or as a sort of a side thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's less and less important who's doing that for me as long as the action is happening, which is what you just said, Neil.
Totally.
Yeah, probably true. And I think in that environment, there's potentially a pay to play there as well. I mean, this happened in the early days of the internet as well, but maybe DoorDash pays to be the default food ordering choice. That's when right. Somebody says, I'd like some pizza.
Well, that's the Google model, right? The search model.
Google model. Yeah.
That's like the anchor tendency of what happened in Internet 1.0, right?
And some of that worked and some of it didn't.
Velocity was the anchor tenant in the travel category. And there were others. What I think is the big news with this is that, as they call it Apple Intelligence, what it sounds like they're doing is it sounds like they're creating this layer where it has various inputs that can be location based. It can be app specific. If you're doing a search on something, if you have a query, John, like what you mentioned, what was that podcast that my wife sent me, right? A complex kind of task like that. And so they're creating this AI layer that's going to have SDKs wrapped around this so that developers can plug into it easily. And they'll be the front end of that user experience through Siri, and it'll be able to call into all these different apps. So what I think you're going to see is a lot of different apps creating that plugin into the AI level so that they can be one of the apps of choice when that use case arises to solve that problem. And that I think is becomes really interesting because then all of these apps very quickly become AI enabled. Yeah. And that levels up their game and levels up the user experience, and all this technology becomes invisible, like what you're saying.
But the experience is through Siri.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's the mediator
on the user in this.
Yeah,
that's right.
So, I would say, so have you guys used, Siri has deep integrations with apps already where developers can make accessible or available specific Siri commands to do specific things. So I can say, order my Starbucks, and Starbucks has created a little automation or shortcut that then takes that and gives me some options. I don't know if you guys have used that, but it's pretty good. And the experience is quite Starbucks branded. So when I do that, I get a little sort of thing with a Starbucks logo. Would you like your venti? Would you like whatever? So that's pretty interesting. I don't know that it's gotten a whole lot of adoption. The really big thing here, the really big innovation is that with all of these app-based shortcuts, I'm the one who needs to be trained to use the right words to order my Starbucks. And when you flip that whole model on its head and say, no, that we're actually going to train the OS through artificial intelligence and interpreting natural language to interpret what I'm saying. And so now it needs to be able to say like, hey, I want to order a venti coffee. It needs to know that that's Starbucks. Hey, I'd like to put in my Starbucks order. It needs to know that that's Starbucks. Like, get me my coffee. I'm tired. Like that.
You could deal with that through sort of a series of default selections, right? Yeah.
Yes. I think that what they're doing, actually, what I'm saying is it solves that. So I don't have to learn how to interact with the system anymore. I just interact as I would normally, and it's starting to. But I would guess that they're going to do the same thing as they're doing in the current Siri integration, which is the Starbucks app, or at least a sort of version of it, pops up with some choices, and I can interact with that either through touch or through voice.
They make a lot of money through the App Store. I don't think they're looking to disintermediate apps. I think you're right. I think they're looking to promote the apps in that, and probably have a pay to play as a default player in that, or if you have a personal preference. So let's move on from Apple just a little bit. Greg, you had a story here about building foundational tools with tech that hallucinates, from Ben Evans. Let's touch on that just a little bit. I thought that was an interesting story.
Yeah, that was a Ben Evans kind of piece where he was saying essentially that I can't do justice to this in just a quick summary, but he was saying that that these AI tools, these generative AI tools, are flawed as a kind of foundational piece of technology, in the sense that they offer probabilistic answers to questions. They don't offer definitive answers. I'm doing a poor job of summarizing. And so it's not a data. They don't have a sort of a structured data set like, U.S. presidents or countries with the largest GDP, or deer-resistant plants or whatever. So you don't get definitive answers. You get these probabilistic answers, and then this raises this sort of subject of hallucination. And you can't completely eliminate that. His point is that you can sort of minimize it, but you can't completely eliminate it. And so it's a problematic technology in some sense. That doesn't quite do justice to it, but that's sort of my quickie summary.
Yeah, and so the fix for some of this, not all of it, but the fix for some of it is RAG data, right? And so the idea is feeding it first-party data that is actual, definitive knowledge, so that it uses that in the results that it outputs. What's interesting about that is, with all of the inputs and all the usage that's going to happen with AI, at some level here, there's going to have to be, and going back to Apple just for a second, when you have all of these Apple users starting to use AI as inputs, there's going to have to be a clearinghouse layer of what is real data and what's actually like the key definitive knowledge information that trains the AI, so that as RAG data, so that the LLMs become smarter. But it's going to be a progression. It's not going to be a perfect.
Well, you get it. You get into this problem that Google has experienced, and that we talked about with the AI overviews spewing bad information, either sort of inaccurate information or really egregiously false information, which Google claims is only a very small percentage of the total number. But that creates a kind of serious PR problem. I mean, Google's confronted a lot of criticism over this, and it makes them look really bad that they can't solve this in their flagship product. And it's kind of an illustration. Yeah, go ahead.
That's an unfair expectation too, that the market has put on these machines to be perfect.
Well, I mean, it's a difference. The glue in the pizza thing is not perfection. There's
all the searches, how many, I mean,
well, right, and that's the Google position. That's the Google position, is that it's a really,
give them credit. They're to some extent they're right. It's like, come on, people.
Yeah, I think probably what is interesting is that the percentage of glue in the pizza results, or glue in the pizza like results, that came up before all this was zero. So it's like, it just, because even if it's 0.01, it's still greater than zero, and so it sort of is alarming. Like,
well, and there's so much scrutiny and so much attention being paid to it, and people are, there's a certain Schadenfreude quality here too. It's like people are looking for Google to screw up. But when Apple introduced its Maps product, right, It made a huge fanfare, and then it had there were all kinds of problems. There were problems with the images. There were problems with directions. They had not sort of vetted it enough, and it took them a decade to recover from that. The perception was that Apple Maps was an inferior product to Google Maps. Why even screw around with it? Because it's going to take you in the wrong direction. It's amateur hour. It took them 10 years to get to the place where they are today, which is, a lot of people are using that as the default. And so the risk is that if these things don't work with the high level of the high profile, like these keynotes and these events where they're really showcased, then there's a real danger to these companies that they have to really qualify it and say this is very limited, it's in beta, you got to be careful, or they've got to make sure that it works good enough 99.9% of the time that people aren't going to have these bad experiences and say WTF is this is stupid or whatever. You don't get a second chance to make a first impression or whatever the Head and Shoulders commercial from the 80s was, or whatever it is. I mean, in some of these cases, the public is forgiving, and in others, it's just not.
Yeah, but Apple was starting up their Maps thing, and Google already has the search traffic. So Apple screwed up the map thing. It never recovered because there was never any usage to begin with.
Well, that's not entirely true. I mean, there was usage. They just set themselves back by not launching a good enough product. Had they launched a better product, it would have been more competitive. Wouldn't have caught Google Maps for the reasons that you say, but it wouldn't have taken them 10 years to recover their reputation to recover,
Going back to kind of the original point you're making here, Greg, like the interesting thing about this and the way that this generative text stuff works is that, because it's probabilistic and it doesn't have sort of natural fact checking built in. It's never going to be quite perfect, no matter how we try to slice and dice it. And it's basically, the way to think about it is that it's actually faking it. It's actually sort of approximating what it thinks that a human is likely to say in a certain circumstance. It reminds me of there's this amazing YouTube video of what English sounds like to non-English speakers, and it's these two actors, and I think they're Danish or something, and they're speaking nonsense English, but they're doing it with a very good American accent. So you listen to it, and there's a part of your brain that goes, well, this is English, and I should be understanding what they're saying, but it doesn't make any sense at all. Like, so there's sort of this concept of like, in this case with these LLMs, they're faking it enough for it to be intelligible and reasonable to pass, all the tests with us until they come up with something like glue on pizza, and then it's extremely confusing. But they're always going to be faking it.
Well, there is a neural network behind all this too. That is a big part of where this all derives from. It's not just it's not just kind of making it up on the fly. There's a lot of foundational information that is underneath all of this.
Well, that goes to your data point, Andy, that you if you train it with good data, then it's going to do much less of this.
And what's different about that from the human experience, by the way?
Yeah, and like, what does it mean to say that it's faking it?
I mean, we take in data,
yeah,
and we say something based on that data. Are we faking it, or are we approximating it?
This is a good question for the philosophers. You're talking about, free will in particular, but I think, when I say, like, I'm saying faking it, of course, to be provocative, but it's also true that we may be using some sort of statistical models that, of course, are neural net based in our brains to figure out the next word to say, but there's clearly something else that's going on that doesn't cause me to statistically just stumble onto, glue on a pizza as the solution. So, when you do pure statistics, you can have something that is intelligible grammatically, but doesn't make any sense factually or otherwise. And that's, I guess, what I mean by faking it. Raw statistical approaches deliver quite good, but often or occasionally very bizarre results.
What happens when you put that into Siri and you got, billions of users using it?
Yeah, and people dying. Look, I mean, there's actually liability, stuff here that is non-trivial.
Why you see Elmer's glue? It's fine. Don't worry.
Right. So we've kind of maybe got time for one more item, and then we should probably wrap.
John, you mentioned something about the rise of words on EPUB for scientific research. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. This is a super quick one. So some research scientists who study academic journals noticed that a specific set of words, the most prominent was delve, DELVE, like I'm going to delve into something, started showing up in huge numbers, disproportionately to how they'd ever shown up before in PubMed articles, coinciding with the release of ChatGPT. So they went and kind of took a look at what was going on, and perhaps not surprisingly, what was going on was that ChatGPT over represents the word delve in its responses, and so people were trying to figure out why that might be happening. And it turns out in this case, one of the ways you can train an AI is through reinforcement learning from human feedback. It's RLHF, which means you take a response and run it to a human panel who says, yeah, that sounds good, or says, no, that doesn't sound good. Well, it turns out that a lot of these models were trained with that reinforcement learning using very large feedback panels from Africa, in particular from Nigeria, where Nigerian English has a prevalence of the word delve in it that's much, much higher than other English-speaking countries, including US, UK, et cetera. So because of where it was trained and that reinforcement learning was happening, this sort of interesting regional quirk around word usage started showing, or has shown up in AI results. And this is actually becoming kind of a big problem with all kinds of words that are showing up disproportionately, and may end up being one sort of AI signature that people can use to detect whether something's AI generated.
I think the bigger deal is the fact that so many of these journal articles are being written by AI.
Yeah. Well, and actually, there's more to that story. So there's a whole bunch of studies now that have been done on actually fake data that was AI generated showing up in these journals, like where they again, it was sort of just statistically, it would make sense that a data table would look like this if it was in an article about this, and it actually made it all the way through to publication.
When you're in an environment of publish or perish, shortcuts are likely to be followed.
And short attention span, where people aren't doing in-depth, analysis of things. They're just skimming, or they're just looking superficially.
Publish or perish, they've created the situation.
Yeah. But
the root cause is a bigger issue to deal with.
Yeah.
To delve into, I should say.
Yeah. Precisely.
Well done.
Last round. Anything else you want to wrap up with for the week? Neil, go ahead.
I keep using these tools to figure out how to do stupid little stuff around the house, and it works really well, like how to deal with my hydrangeas. I've learned a lot about hydrangea care through ChatGPT. It's pretty good.
And the proof of whether it's accurate is whether they live or die, right?
Well, they're flowering and they're good. So
far, so good.
I did learn that bananas are a great fertilizer for hydrangeas.
Oh,
but other than that,
is that a hallucination or is that true?
Well, I learned it. I don't know if it's true. I'll let you know.
I heard Elmer's glue is also good for hydrangeas.
Non-toxic glue. Yeah. So, my usage continues. I've got the Mac client now, and I've got I've typically got something going on the client and something going on the browser tab. So I have multiple ChatGPT windows open. And the problem for me is like, where was that thing that I wanted to see, and scrolling and trying to find, it's sort of too many things going on simultaneously, but it's I'm all in. I'm 100% that this is just a great new technology. Now, talk to me when the fires are burning everywhere and the apocalypse has come, right? But that's a different discussion.
Yeah, next year's problem. I would say I would just continue to explore all the tools as well. Most of my tech time this week, though, was taken up trying to make the developer betas work on my phone and my computer and my new watch. So didn't get a whole lot of new tool time.
You're a brave man.
My new interest is I'm fascinated by all this AI video generation stuff that's going on. This is the new frontier for sure. And there's Kling that just came out this week, which was the new video algorithm from China. I wonder if that's going to push ChatGPT to release sooner because they're starting to get some attention. So a lot of interesting things going on the video generation side. Should be seeing that probably by
which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in future episodes.
Yeah. Well, great, guys. Another great episode. Thank you so much. And that's a wrap for today. Tune in next week for more information with 4 guys talking about AI. Thank you all.